Hello and welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. This year marks an important milestone for a work of science fiction. That's right, it's the 46th anniversary of Jerry and Sylvia Anderson's show UFO! (1980). But yeah, Star Trek is turning 50. I have watched Star Trek as far back as I can remember. It and Doctor Who were my first exposure to science fiction, and probably what eventually led me to become the dork I am today. I don't even have to tell you its impact on actual science, on pop culture, on just what an inspiration it is to people. You've heard it all before. It is 50 friggin' years old, and the fact that I was able to reference UFO and not have a single one of you know what the hell I was talking about means a lot. I bet many of you are nowhere near as nerdy as I am, but can quote at least something from Star Trek. I don't see anyone walking around quoting The Star Lost. Although I am that nerdy, and I couldn't quote anything from The Star Lost. I dropped the ball with Doctor Who's 50th anniversary and only reviewed one thing that year from it, a month after the anniversary. Well, screw that! I may have missed the first quarter of the year with Star Trek, but we're gonna make up for it in a big way. This year, I'm going to review a crap ton of Star Trek comics. Almost every month, you can expect me to cover something from across the franchise. And to kick things off, we're gonna bring all 5 live-action television series together in one comic. That is really kind of lame. In 2012, nonprofit X Prize, which sponsors public competitions to build technological achievements that will benefit mankind, partnered with the tech company Qualcomm to launch a contest to build one singular object. Oh look! Tricorder! For those less Trek savvy, a tricorder is a multi-purpose diagnostic tool that can scan anything from environmental conditions to energy emissions, or in the case of today, a medical tricorder which can instantly diagnose a patient. And that's what the purpose of the competition is. And because technological breakthroughs do not happen overnight, while the contest officially launched in 2012, the winner will not be announced until 2017. And there are several teams that have been working on it, and frankly, if they can create such a device, it's a pretty big deal and speaks to one of Star Trek's themes, that the advancement of technology will help us create a better world. Or, you know, we could reject our technology and be a bunch of dumbass, immortal, smug elf farmers who all wear earth tones and let billions suffer, including those who we somehow kicked off our planet despite having no technology. I don't like Star Trek Insurrection! In 2014, to help promote the contest, X Prize worked with IDW, which currently holds Star Trek's comic license, to create a comic that unites all the doctors of the various television series together, which I really like. The captain of any Star Trek show is usually the one who gets all the focus. While Star Trek is an ensemble, it's easy for some characters to get left behind, get little development, or just not get as much screen time as the captains. So having a story with all of them together seems pretty dang cool. The end result, though, is just kinda meh. Let's dig into Star Trek Special Flesh and Stone, and I'll show you. The cover is okay, if slightly confusing. It has pictures of all 6 of the TV show doctors, with 3 contemporaries, Dr. Bashir, Dr. Crusher, and Dr. Doctor, all plainly visible. Dr. Phlox and Dr. McCoy make sense to have kinda half-hidden since they're from the distant past, but why the hell is Dr. Pulaski like that too? Pulaski replaced Dr. Crusher for season 2 of The Next Generation, so her inclusion is fine, but why the hell is she in the background? Is she dead? Anyway, we open at Space Station Diamandis 1. I see even into the 24th century they recall the legacy of Diamanda Hagen, our terrifying Empress Eternal. Ensign Hava.
Yes, sir?
I see the way you're looking at that long-range scan report. What's going on?
That man is playing Galaga. Thought we wouldn't notice.
They've detected an unlogged ship, which the Benzite sensor officer failed to report because, well, it's a thing with Benzites, as established in an old TNG episode. It's a slippery slope, too. First they fail to report things, then they're reviewing porn games. Also, a lesser-known thing about Benzites, their heads balloon up, apparently, as we see here. However, the captain in charge of the station realizes that it's an escape pod, likely a long-range one from a freighter that's ferrying sick or wounded. Coincidence of all coincidences, the station happens to be hosting a massive Starfleet medical conference. Doctor? 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 The conference is also a total sausage fest from the look of things. Fortunately, that will be rectified thanks to a nearby runabout carrying Dr. Bashir from Deep Space Nine, Dr. Crusher from The Next Generation, and the aforementioned Dr. Pulaski. Once again, making me wonder why the hell they shoved her into the background of the cover. Given the current demographics of the conference, maybe they were like, yeah, no old or ugly chicks, but we'll give top priority to the hot redhead. Put her front and center. Dr. Crusher expresses her excitement about a panel on nanoprobes. Yeah, but then you know it's just gonna turn into the same old Q&A asking, how did you get into nanoprobes? Why haven't you released another history of nanoprobes video? All that stuff. Pulaski, being just as much the anti-technology curmudgeon she was back in her season, says nanoprobes can't be trusted. Are you insane? Why, that's just asking to get us all assimilated. Dr. Pulaski also doesn't use scalpels in surgical procedures, since that's just asking someone to get stabbed. But of course, Dr. Crusher talks about how the technology is useful outside of turning people into mindless automatons to serve the Borg Collective. Fine, maybe nanotechnology has some potential benefits. That said, I'm pretty sure that I would prefer not to have those little robotic critters swimming around in my bloodstream. It might ruin my swimsuit modeling career. However, as they approach the station, Dr. Bashir detects an energy beacon from the station, with a message being sent out by the Doctor. I always figured it was time for a bald regeneration. Actually, while he's referred to as the Doctor, that's only because he didn't have a name during the series. The Doctor is from Star Trek Voyager, an emergency medical hologram. The EMH is supposed to be a temporary measure, but during Voyager's first episode, the entire medical staff was killed, leaving him as the only medical personnel they had. As such, he developed into a fully fleshed out person and one of the breakout characters of the show, sometimes with the best dry humor, while other times being kind of annoying, but hey, that's what you get when you develop the characters. Anyway, the Doctor has implemented a quarantine of the station since an epidemic has broken out all over it. The three contact him, and they all get to work, since of course, despite my snark, you've got 3 skilled physicians and a super genius, probably even more skilled. All personnel are completely paralyzed or rapidly becoming so, their bodies seemingly undergoing an unexplained transformation to a stone-like substance, almost as if they're crystallizing. Well, that's what happens when you leave them in the microwave for too long. He explains that the escape pod arrived under automatic control at the station just under a day ago. Now, considering the 4 people in the escape pod were unconscious and there was no reason to necessarily suggest anything that would require a quarantine when they first found the pod, that's fine, but these people are now grayer than a Homestuck cosplayer, so you'd think they'd exercise a little bit more control over the situation. Worse, even though all decontamination protocols were implemented, everyone on the station, the crew and the visiting physicians, began to show symptoms of the disease. All decontamination protocols? There are like a dozen people crowded around the escape pod in their regular clothes and no isolation from anyone! No one's even wearing gloves as they touch the patients! Anyway, since he's a hologram, he's of course unaffected and thus the only one on the station working on it, so he appreciates their help. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be anything in the Starfleet medical database that this points to, nor have any of the other doctors seen it before. Pulaski is dubious about the EMH's credentials. Bashir, how good are these medical holograms anyway? Can we be sure we're getting accurate information here? Hey, Dr. Cox, do you have anything to say about Dr. Pulaski?
No, I'm a good doctor.
Here's the thing about Pulaski. She is actually a skilled doctor, but the writers attempted to make her a second McCoy, trying to have her butt heads with Data like Spock and McCoy had. The only problem is that these are very different characters. Spock and McCoy were supposed to be extremes to Kirk's more balanced perspective of both emotion and rationality. That dynamic does not exist, and in fact she butted heads with Picard's more often, it seems. And while McCoy said the occasional prejudice thing, you got the idea that really was more a conflict of personality and philosophy to life, while still respecting Spock as a person and defending him and his race. Whereas with Pulaski, her introduction episode showed that she had no respect for Data as a living being, simply because he's an android and she's technophobic. Now, admittedly, they toned this back big time after the first few episodes of the season, and I applaud character development. But her being unwilling to trust the EMH after she's already had that experience with Data just seems to indicate that she didn't learn crap. I'll give Pulaski this, though. She's the one who points out that it seems like a very odd coincidence that a mysterious disease aboard a mysterious escape pod should just happen to occur at a conference featuring all the best and brightest of Starfleet medical. Then again, this is Star Trek, where the Enterprise is frequently the only ship in range of a disaster, so it's not like the universe isn't known for that kind of thing. What's more, the fact that they're unable to find anything close to this seems odd. Not unlikely, but the Federation is made up of over 150 civilizations with thousands, if not millions, of doctors across those worlds, and of course pioneering scientists and doctors on starships exploring out into the universe. Add in allies and other alien races trading medical information to help combat the potential of diseases jumping species, it's far more likely that something's up. And of course, the EMH is quick to check the computer banks and discovers that, indeed, there's a well-hidden trail of data deletion dating back to records from 2269, specifically with the earliest record being from the original series Enterprise. Fortunately, as it happens, Dr. McCoy is still alive, as established in the very first episode of The Next Generation. He's also over 150 years old at this point. But hey, that's what happens when you take your vitamins. And on the happier coincidence side of things, he's retired to an agricultural colony nearby, so the three are able to travel there to try to get help. They would have just called him, but he refused to get one of them newfangled communicators with their apps and their GPS tracking and their Candy Crush, and he just kind of kept going on like that. In a cute little in-joke, the agricultural colony resembles a bit of a Wild West town, to reference DeForest Kelley's origins in Cowboy Fare. Although I see that this is also where the Daily Planet ended up moving to in the future. Anyway, a local points them in Dr. McCoy's direction, where he's serving as the town doctor, despite the fact that he looks like a slightly healthier Davros. I don't doubt that he could still practice a little medicine, but geez, McCoy does not go down without a fight, does he? But of course, being such a dedicated physician, he's on hand to help. How far away do I have to go before Starfleet can't find me anymore? You better not be here to draft me. Tell Spock I paid his damn $10 back 75 years ago, and I'm not falling for that again. They explain the situation, and as it happens, he does recall the particulars of the situation where he got the medical information. A flashback takes us to a colony on the edge of the Tholian border, where the Enterprise received a distress call. Beaming down in hazmat suits to assist, Dr. McCoy met with Dr. Phlox from the prequel series Star Trek Enterprise. Not the Dr. Phlox, the one who advocated for genocide of an innocent race in an episode, and then patted his commanding officer on the back for approving of the genocide? What's funny is that Dr. Phlox was my favorite character on Enterprise until that episode, since he was the optimistic eccentric on a crew of assholes, morons, and cynics. Yeah, needless to say, that show is awful aside for most of season 3 and 4, where the show got good again. And it's best to forget that episode, Dear Doctor, ever friggin' happened unless you want to throw something at the screen every single time you see that smug dickhead stretch his lips into a smile. Now, as for how he can still be alive when Enterprise took place around 100 years before the original series, Phlox is part of a species called Denobulans, and while we don't know a lot about their race, one thing we do know is that they are very long-lived. He explains that after he stopped teaching at Starfleet Academy, he went on walkabout just exploring things, stopping at the colony to help them out while they were between doctors. It's this scene in particular that highlights one of the problems of this comic. We have two very different doctors from across generations meeting with one another, with the very grumpy McCoy encountering someone as happy-go-lucky as Phlox. And all their dialogue is shop talk. The same goes for all the other doctors. The only ones who get any kind of meat in this story are Pulaski and the EMH, with Pulaski's personality coming through with her technophobia, and the doctor getting some action later. You could say McCoy's crotchetiness is clear from earlier, but that's all you can say. You could replace the other characters with anybody else and it wouldn't make a difference. They're all flat and boring. Hell, Bashir doesn't do anything except drive the runabout. He doesn't do a single damn medical thing at all. The closest we get to acknowledgement of him as a character was him mentioning his experience with EMHs, that they were highly intelligent. Oh yes, the EMHs are remarkable devices with lots of medical knowledge. And my last encounter with them resulted in my status of having been illegally genetically enhanced to be exposed to the world, and got my father sent to prison. Anyway, it's not like Phlox's presence is all that necessary either. When they talk to a colonist who can still speak, he acknowledges that he got a scarf from the Tholians, and even Phlox admits, crap, why didn't I realize he had a diseased piece of cloth on him? He says the Tholians themselves have crystalline bodies, and with the arrival of 3 Tholian ships in orbit, it seems like something is up. Fortunately, the Tholians don't make a fuss, and the doctors are able to synthesize an antidote for the disease. Said disease isn't actually turning them to stone, but is creating a carapace similar to Tholian biology. Back in the 24th century, McCoy finishes up his story and gives them his old medical tricorder, which he just happened to still own and still has all the information on it. That's a bit of a narrative convenience, I'll admit, but even I found 15-year-old data on my hard drives before, so I'd imagine the future would be even better about preserving data storage. Carried this thing around for 5 years, never had the heart to get rid of it. Broke I don't know how many regulations sneaking it off the ship when we returned to Earth. Never emptied out the memory banks either. Just, don't check the files marked private. Look, 150 years is a very long and lonely time, okay? They contact the doctor back on the station as they head out, and he realizes that somebody must have been responsible for deleting all the files from their computers. After consulting with the station captain to determine the crew complement, and then checking the life form readings on the internal sensors, the doctor finds someone hiding in the shuttle bay. He goes to confront him, immune to phaser fire since, well, he's a hologram. The guy, some big bearded asshole who we never get a name for, admits that he was paid to wipe out the computer banks to prevent a cure from being found, and, of course, to wipe out all of Starfleet's best medical minds at once. He plans now to detonate the warp cores of all the shuttles and escape in a life pod, although how he himself is immune to the airborne disease is anyone's guess. He also figures he's got the doctor at a stalemate, since he's programmed with the Hippocratic Oath. Despite the doctor acknowledging that, he proceeds to simply open the shuttle bay doors and vent the atmosphere, knocking the guy unconscious. And he wasn't blown out into space from this because... quantum. I love how they don't even try to give a logical reason why this is okay despite the do no harm thing. It's just like, yep, it's a contradiction, but whatever. I once abandoned my friends and duty to become a singer on some alien planet on the other side of the universe. This is nothing. With the man incapacitated, our heroes quickly cure the personnel. Look at that. The recovery time is remarkable. It's called the reset button. I would have thought you guys would be used to it by now. While some of them work on distributing the cure's information to all neighboring systems that might be affected by this, Dr. Pulaski wonders why the hell this all happened. Fortunately, the EMH gives her a crap ton of exposition in the third-to-last panel of the comic. Basically, a splinter group among the Tholians wanted them to become an expansionist power by transforming all life in the neighboring systems to be like the Tholians, and thus forcing them to alter the environments to suit Tholians.
Of course! Don't you know anything about science?
Yeah, this kind of ignores the tiny problem of changing the people won't actually change the environments. So yeah, as far as evil plans go, that's pretty dumb. Hell, this is especially dumb using that virus on the station full of medical personnel, since in a space station like this, they can control the environment, and thus they'd be able to survive and be active enough to come up with a cure. And so our comic ends with Pulaski and the EMH injecting somebody together, and her acknowledging that he's awesome. This comic sucks. It's certainly not the worst out there, and the premise has potential, but it's just so lackluster. You have the potential of 6 different people from across the ages meeting, and they don't do anything with it. Hell, you could have had Phlox still be alive. There was no limit ever put on how old Denobulans get, thus actually having all 6 meeting each other. But even then, the small bits of characterization we do get are so insignificant that it makes no difference to the story if they were there at all. And poor Dr. Bashir got nothing. You could have actually cut him from the story entirely, and it would have made 0 difference. Not an auspicious start to our celebration of Star Trek's 50th anniversary. Next time, it's back to Patreon-sponsored reviews, where the dead will rise. So, why didn't anybody just have the runabout connect to Starfleet's medical records outside of the station to get updated files? Or is the Wi-Fi even worse in the 24th century?